Hello enthusiasts, welcome to Wine in the Bottle. I'm your host Sarah, and this is the wine podcast for enthusiasts of all levels. And I like to take you off the page of the textbook into the greater world of wine. What do I have in my glass today is the question. This is a champagne, a true champagne from Champagne, France. In fact, it's a Piper Heidsieck. And Piper Heidsieck is one of the oldest champagne houses in Reims, France. And I'm sure that I'm pronouncing that wrong. Maybe it's Reims. I'm not sure. But Piper Heidsieck dates all the way back to 1786, I believe. And it was founded by a German man named Heidsieck, who fell in love with the Champagne region and decided to create something beautiful, champagne. Now, he was not the first person to make champagne that is credited to Dom Perignon. Well, whether or not that is actually true is debatable, but Dom Perignon famously said, "Come quick, I am tasting the stars," when he discovered champagne. So, what makes champagne so unique and so special? And what does it really mean? Well, that's a great question, because I think to most people champagne is ubiquitous for any bubbly wine, but that's not at all correct. Champagne is its own unique element, its own production style, and it comes from a specific place. In fact, any sparkling wine labeled champagne has to come from Champagne, France. Otherwise, it's not really champagne. So what makes this glass unique? It's biscuity and bready with a little bit of mushroom and hay. It's definitely been on the lees for a while, which means that it has sat on the yeast cells in the bottle for an extended period of time. For standard champagne, the restriction is that it must age on the lees, on the yeast, for at least 12 months. If it has a vintage stamp on it, on the bottle, if it specifically says it comes from a certain year, it has to be on the lees for at least 3 years. Sometimes can be aged for a decade or more. This particular wine is the Prohibition edition, and I'll bring the bottle back up again. So this is the Piper Heidsieck bottle. It's a Brut, and it is their Prohibition edition, so it was in celebration of the repeal of Prohibition. So this wine was definitely aged for a while, but I still get these beautiful primary characteristics from it as well. There's yellow peach and apple, honeysuckle. Not quite as much citrus. I do get a little bit of lemon, but it's stone fruit, green fruit, and floral. So if we take a taste here. It has really soft bubbles, and that could be because it's not really chilled at this point. It's been in my glass for a little bit. When I first poured it, it foamed up beautifully. It had this gorgeous mousse that just bubbled over. On the palate, it's kind of got some weight to it. There's definitely a roundness and a heavy, not full body, but definitely on the heavier side of medium. It is a little tangy on the palate, more lemony, a little yogurty, and there is a bit of minerality in here as well. Nice bright acid to counteract that little bit of residual sugar. It's making my mouth water a lot. And the finish goes on for miles. So I'm sitting here explaining it to you, and I can still taste the wine. Fantastic. Great cup. So What are the restrictions that make this a champagne? First of all, it has to come from Champagne, France. And then, in the vineyard, there are restrictions just on grape growing. So, I'm going to go to my script now. So there are only 7 grape varieties that are approved for use in a champagne. Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Meunier are the 3 most common. And then you could also use Petit Meunier, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, and Arban. And those last 2 were recently added. So you get 7 choices to put into your wine. Then the grape varieties that are chosen are suited to a cool climate because it is very cold in Champagne. Even during the summers, it really doesn't get that warm. And it's a continental climate. So the summers and the winters have a large range of temperatures, and it's not very consistent. So frost is a huge problem. In fact, in 2021, the harvest was severely affected by frosts in the early part of the growing season. So in, I believe it was March and April, there was an extended period of frost, several days. And that damages the vines and prevents good growth, basically. So the crop was reduced. Other things to know about the Champagne region is that it has chalky limestone soil. So the drainage works really well. There's a lot of rain in the wintertime, and that rain just drains right through the limestone and forms a reservoir underneath, which can help later in the year if there is no rain later in the year, or in times of drought where there might not have been enough rain over the winter. There's still water in the underground reservoirs. So that's a unique aspect to Champagne. And I think terroir has a lot to do with what makes Champagne special. Because this style of wine is made all across the world. And we'll get more into the style in a moment. But the chalky limestone gives it a zing, a minerality that you don't find in warmer climate or more fertile soil-based vines. So what happens in the vineyard is that everything has to be done by hand in Champagne. No mechanisms can be used. It cannot be mechanized at all. It's all done by hand and it's regulated. So in good years where there is a lot of rain, the yields have to be controlled because there is a cap put on by the regulatory authority. So the farmers have to go in and select the inflorescences or the grape bunches before they've formed berries. They have to choose the best ones and cull the rest because they can only produce a certain amount per hectare or per acre. But the restrictions don't end in the vineyard. Once you get to the winery, you have to follow some specific rules and regulations in order to create traditional method Champagne. And all Champagne is traditional method. So first of all, you make a base still wine from one of those 7 grape varieties. The still wine then gets bottled, and you put in a liqueur de tirage, which is sugar mixed with wine and yeast. And what that does is you put it in the bottle and you cap the bottle, and it goes through a secondary fermentation in the bottle that it will be sold in, and that is a regulation as well. It has to be secondary fermented in the bottle in which it will be sold. So in that bottle, the yeasts eat the extra sugar and they eventually will die. And the cells, this is kind of gross, the cells will settle to the bottom of the bottle and then it has to sit there. Champagne does not go through a filtration process like some still wines do, most still wines. Instead, to get rid of the sediment, it is racked and riddled. So you take the bottle, you put it in a rack, and you start out horizontal. And then every so often, depends on the producer, you go in and turn the bottle ever so slightly, so now it's at a slight angle and it's also been rotated. And the best champagne houses do this by hand. It's a very slow, very tedious process. Some champagne houses will use what they call a gyro palate, and it is mechanized, and it will do that same thing just on a more consistent level. So once you have rotated the bottle to the point where it is now vertical, you disgorge and get rid of all that sediment. So you freeze the neck of the bottle, open up the cap, and the pressure from inside the bottle, because that secondary fermentation has produced carbon dioxide, which has mixed in with the solution of the wine, and that's how you get those beautiful bubbles. It's carbon dioxide. So the pressure pushes on the ice in the neck of the bottle, which has trapped all the sediment inside, and pops it right out. Then you top off the bottle with a solution of wine and sugar, which, depending on what style of wine you're making, what style of champagne, you could put more sugar or less sugar or none at all if you're okay with the sweetness as it is. That's called dosage. And this new wine, or the same wine that you had in the same bottle, gets corked and sent off for sale. And that is traditional method. And traditional method is made throughout the world, but it can't be called champagne. It has to be called sparkling wine. And in Germany it's called Sekt. In South Africa it is Cap Classique. And here in the United States it's traditional method. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as method traditional in French. So there's a little bit of backstory about what makes champagne special and how there are multitudes of sparkling wines throughout the world that you can try that are still made exactly the same as champagne, but from a different region. So if you hear the term sparkling wine, don't shy away from it. And now I think I'll cut to an interview with Paula Kornell of Kornell Sparkling Wines here in the Napa Valley, and see what she has to say about champagne and California sparkling. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I always like to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves because you know better than anyone what your passions are. So what's your elevator pitch?
What is my elevator pitch? That's a good one. I don't even know that. I guess it would be Paula Kornell, 4th generation sparkling wine producer. My great-grandparents and grandparents all made Sekt in Germany, and then my father here. And I'm just in a different way, taking the tradition and redefining it. So it's really wonderful.
I love that.
Thanks.
This whole episode is about champagne, but you mentioned Sekt. And so I would love to bring up what the differences are, because I know a lot of people who, in the general population, think champagne is synonymous with all sparkling wine, and it is certainly not. It is a very niche category. So champagne versus Sekt, what's the difference?
Sekt is German champagne, only it's made in Germany. And there's, like sparkling wine, like Prosecco, there's many different ways of producing it, but most German Sekt is made in the method champenois, which is the traditional champagne, which means that it's made in the bottle that you're getting, with all naturally fermented and not processed in any other way.
Yeah. So if you were to set down a bottle of your sparkling wine from California, a bottle from Champagne, and a bottle from Germany that's in the style of Sekt, would you be able to tell the difference?
That is a very good question. I Probably would. Probably would, just because to me champagne definitely has a very specific taste to it. Maybe not taste is the right word, but there's definitely a flavor that I think that goes through all champagnes. It's a little bit more yeasty than we can ever produce here. German sect, I honestly have not in the most recent years had any, so to be able to sit down and say what the similarities would be as far as taste, because they're using now pretty much the exact same grapes. Yes, there are some that are made with Riesling and other dry whites, but they too are doing more Chardonnay and Pinot Noir also. But my father had a sparkling that was called Zertrunken that he did in the very German style, because it was 100% Riesling, but it was bone dry, so you would never have known that it was Riesling. Wow. So I think that even today that would surprise most of us in Germany, how dry some of those wines are.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of German wine is associated with sweetness.
Absolutely, which is really sad. It's sad that we just automatically feel that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are missing the boat when we're not drinking as much. We're not drinking great Rieslings, Pinot Blanc, Gewürztraminers. We are thinking constantly that they can only be with Asian food, or that they're going to be sweet, and by far they're not. And they go with, like bubbles, they go with everything.
So if you had to make an unconventional pairing with sparkling wine and something totally off the rails that no one would expect, what would you pair it with?
Oh, last night we had it with a beautiful filet of beef with horseradish, and we had the Blanc de Noir that we've got a mimosa drinking now. But yes, I mean, there's enough acidity and enough backbone that it goes with a lot of different things. And it's just like German wines, people think that, oh, sparkling, you can only drink with dessert, and no, it goes with so many different, and it's really about the style. No, you don't want to be drinking a French extra dry, which is fairly sweet, but if you have something that's got some backbone and age to it, it definitely goes with a little bit of everything. My father was funny, because growing up, we had a bubbles called Rouge, and it was 100% Gamay, and it was delicious on the dry side. So when I would do winemaker dinners, even back then, people were feeling most people felt much more comfortable when they were drinking something that was red, that was bubbles. The dryness or sweetness was still there, but I could just see that people felt more comfortable because it was red.
Because it was red. That's so interesting.
It's our minds, the things we do.
So I wanted to ask, I went to your talk at the Art of Champagne screening, and what stuck out to me was that idea that champagne is so well known. I have a new best friend. Champagne is so well known, so ubiquitous. But if California sparkling could be called anything other than that to sort of bolster its reputation, it could be. And do you feel that way with other regions in the world as well, like German sect and Italian cava or prosecco? I
think that all the different countries have a much more sexy name for their wine. I do think it's hard for the consumer. Prosecco, you can't say that all Prosecco is Method Champenois by any means.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult no matter what nomenclature you're using. I just hate the thing sparkling wine. To me it sounds really cheap and it doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
And yet, in all respect of champagne, I certainly don't want to be calling it champagne. I get tired of trying to explain Method Champenois, which that's my job, is to explain Method Champenois. And then everyone since then, and ever since that night, I say that a lot. God, we have to come up with something much nicer. And they'll go, well, why don't you have that on? Yeah, sure, in my free time, I'm going to do that. It just seems that it's hard for the consumer to know what is traditional champagne style, or it's something that's been pumped with CO2. And even with pricing, it's hard to explain too, because you have all those Proseccos coming into the market that you can buy from anywhere from $6 to $25, and my Brut goes anywhere from $15 to $25, and here that's method champenois, so it's hard to even put a price on it. So I don't know, I always tell everybody to look for method champenois or traditional method
on the bottle.
But yeah, we need to come up with that. So any ideas people have, I think we need a better name. It seems like lately I've been saying I'm in the bubble business versus in the sparkling wine business, just because, again, I just think that's, but bubbles could be just about anything. It could be bubble bath, it could be, so I'm like, oh, that's okay, as long as it's got bubbles in it. It's good.
I love that. Do you have a preferred method of more like the house method or the vintage method of sparkling wine?
I think both. I mean, truly it's both. For me, for my brand, it's important that I have something that is truly has my heart and soul, which is the Blanc de Noir and my Blanc de Blanc that's still on the yeast. So those are vintage wines, and they're all Napa Valley.
Okay.
So for my brand, as we go on, everything from Napa Valley is vintage, and meaning that it's also aging longer on the yeast.
Yeah.
Where the Brut is a year and a half on the yeast, but it's a California appellated, but it definitely fits the needs for bubbles that you can be enjoying every single day, and which you should be. I mean, to me, I don't care if you're drinking the Brut or if you're not drinking mine, but drinking, I think, bubbles is a really enlightenment for each day.
As Dom Perignon supposedly said,
Yeah.
I'm tasting the stars.
Absolutely. And here we have a mimosa in front of us. I truly disliked mimosas terribly, because I think most of it, what we've all had, especially if you go out, is the least expensive bubbles, and usually it's not method champenois, and bad orange juice.
Yeah.
But if you get great orange juice and great bubbles, it really makes a whole elevated experience. So now I'm like, God, I kind of like this to start the day. And no, I don't do that every day.
That's the wine business.
Yeah.
Area.
Oh yeah.
It's funny. My day job is that I'm sales and concierge. I tell my guests all the time, when you're in Napa, it's okay to start early.
You bet. I do like when people are visiting here, and I do not have a tasting room, so everything is here at the house, and just as you see, part of it is being entertained by these creatures, or the guests entertaining my dogs. But I do like to catch people in the morning, because I think it's fun to start your day out with some bubbles, and it's obviously good to finish your day off too, but I like them before they've hit every Cabernet producer in the valley.
And they come to you after several glasses of 15% wine. So, what do you think makes the Champagne region so unique?
The heart and soul. Definitely the people, the history, the legacy that has taken place. Like what we heard in that movie was the strong influence of very strong women that have made that business so, have carried on for so long. I think, and they've mastered their trade. I mean, it's an incredible trade, and I think other parts of the world, including the United States, we all make good bubbles, but I think we can continue to do better, and I think we are doing better too. Yeah, they're jokesters, but yes, I think to me it's a lot of the tradition has really been part of it, and their legacy of vineyards. They do so much sourcing of, I believe it's Krug that has, I can't even believe how many different vineyard sites that they're sourcing from to make their wine, where then there's others that are getting their grapes from one vineyard in particular. So it's all over the board. But stylistically, it's just different from what we're doing.
Definitely, absolutely. I think terroir factors in pretty strongly as well, and I know that there's debate on whether or not terroir is functional in a glass of wine. I think it is. Because of everything that goes into growing that berry that goes into your bottle, it's really, all of the factors are important. So the chalky soils of Champagne versus our 33 different soil subsets.
Absolutely. And the last time I was there was just before COVID, and to be there in the middle of February with snow on the ground and it being truly a winter wonderland, which we don't get here. Turn this off. So my psychiatry is definitely making jam. So cracks me up where I'll open the door some mornings and there's boxes of fruit out there, and oh God bless it, I better do something with it. So I love being able to do that. So
that's awesome. My grandmother used to make jam all the time, but she's got really bad arthritis now, so it makes the stirring hard.
Yeah, it's hard. So please help yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, what's your take on caviar and champagne?
I love it.
Yeah?
I love it. And matter of fact, I'm doing, in the middle of launching a high-low program that is high being caviar with Polanco caviar, which is a family caviar producer in Uruguay.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm doing, that's the high, and the low is fried chicken.
Oh,
so
love it.
I've partnered with Dave Cruz, who started with, he did not start with, but he was with Thomas Keller in the inception of Ad Hoc, and so started that whole fried chicken craze there. So we're just now starting this, that really, it's back to bubbles go with everything, and you can have a beautiful classic setup of caviar, but you can also have a great omelet with caviar on top, or, you don't have to have anything with just caviar, just caviar.
Just caviar.
And fried chicken goes with the salt and the fat content of it just is perfect with the acidity of both Brut and Blanc Noir, of any bubbles. It just really goes well. So it's not a new combination by any means, but it's something that, but I think that saltiness of caviar, and it's back really fried chicken too, the saltiness of both of them, it just, the acidity and the yeast just sort of eats through with all of that, and it's luscious.
I love that. I'm a big fan of fried chicken and wine with fried chicken. I had a Ghost Block Sauvignon Blanc that I paired with Ad Hoc fried chicken, and I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world.
It does. It really, it's really excellent. I mean, there's really, it really works out well. So, but yeah, I think caviar, and caviar also, to me, it reminds me of learning about, so when I was working for Robert Mondavi, it was the era of lots of cigar smokers.
Yeah.
And I would go into Dunhill, and I was so clueless about ordering cigars because I'd have to order quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I knew I liked a particular cigar. What did I know? I'm not a cigar smoker. So sitting down with Juan Diego from Polanco Caviar, I thought I knew something. Forget it. I knew nothing. I mean, just the whole breadth of knowing about how caviar is produced, nomenclature of names that we think is a type of caviar, meanwhile just a marketing group. So it's fascinating. There's so much to know.
It's just as nuanced as champagne itself.
Exactly.
Oh,
so
wow.
What our job is now to make it all much easier so people can enjoy it.
Absolutely. So with aging champagne, there's all the different styles in between.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum 12 months on the leaves, sometimes up to 5 years. Do you feel like the different aging categories go well with different occasions or different food pairings?
That's a very good question. Let me think about this one.
Okay.
Personally, the older and yeastier a wine is for me, I enjoy just consuming, drinking it and enjoying it. The things that are a little bit heavier as well as those that are lighter weight, I love having with. So the lighter weight, yes, can be drank by itself, but it's also great with fruit or with, here, since I have chickens, I do a lot of deviled eggs. So it can go basically with everything, but I really enjoy the older, yeastier wines to drink by themselves just because I'm savoring it. I'm truly savoring it. However, they do, like when I was talking about beef, they also would go great because they can stand on their own.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's over. My answer is also two-spaced because I want to be selfish and enjoy it in one way, and then in the other, I think it goes well with everything.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I mean, bubbles really do go well with everything. They're an everyday kind of drink. I found myself, even in the last couple of years, sort of migrating towards the celebration bottles are more those like aged reds that I've had in the cellar forever, instead of the bubbles, which have become more of the like everyday, normal occasion, drink with everything kind of wines. And I think that that's kind of an overarching consensus throughout the wine community. Just kind of a nice migration.
And now we're so lucky in the United States to have so many great grower champagnes coming in. And that's why it was hard for the Napa Valley, for the Blanc de Noir. I knew it had to stay in that $50, $60 range because for me also, why would I drink California sparkling, even though I love that? But when I have some other great choices I just would like people to be open-minded with the French that they do drink, as well as the California, that just because something seems sexy on the outside and it has great marketing, that try other things too, because there's lots of brands out there that we all see and we love the packaging, but there's other wines that are luscious.
Makes me think of those new commercials for Snoop Dogg's champagne.
Oh yeah, well, we've got every rapper doing a bubble now.
Lady Gaga is partnering with Dom Perignon, and it's obviously it's a marketing ploy. But it's also kind of an endorsement because that person is putting their name on that brand. So if you could pick any celebrity from any field, who would you want to be your frontman?
For me personally, that was a question that was asked that night. The last question of the evening, I'll never forget that, was who, living or dead, what would you choose? And I did not answer quick enough. I would have to say, since I love the classics, it would be someone like Jackie Kennedy, or it would be somebody like Audrey Hepburn, or something in that Princess Grace, or somebody like that would be female, but also in this day and age, I'd love to have somebody that's really a strong individual out there. It does crack me up that when you look at the numbers for tequila, what has happened since there's so many tequila brands out there that have either a musician or actor or someone behind them. It's pretty amazing.
It really is, and it's something that I think can be helpful and harmful at the same time, because so many people will associate that person with that product. It sort of wipes the board for all of the other products out there, all of the other smaller producers who are still producing quality product, and it's just not getting out because there's this face.
Well, and it's difficult. I did this summer a tasting for Jameson Rescue, and Christy Brinkley was there with her vegan Prosecco. And I found it was lovely, but I found it really odd that that was the marketing. Her marketing was that it was vegan when, of course, it's vegan.
Yeah.
So it just showed, it had nothing to do with the quality of the wine, which was there and it was lovely. She's beautiful and a great spokesperson for her brand. But to me, I just found that an interesting marketing choice on her part, that was going to be, that it was vegan when all of our bubbles are vegan.
And I think that just goes to show that some people don't know the process of wine processes, and some wines are filtered and fined, and that might include egg whites or gelatin or milk. So maybe those wines are not technically vegan, even though you're not consuming any animal product. But bubbles are filtered differently, not really filtered at all. It's just the disgorgement process.
Correct.
So there is absolutely no filtering and fining involved. So of course, naturally, they're vegan, but a lot of people don't know that.
They are. And it's funny you actually say that, because I'm constantly sitting around this table. I will have done a whole tasting, and then someone will ask me a question. I'll say, "Do you know how bubbles are made?" And it's because it's back to cigars or caviar. We don't know. So that's why I'm always, please, can I explain to you how champagne or sparkling wine is made? And then the light bulb goes off in people's eyes, and now I get it. Now I understand, which I think we just take it for granted I take it for granted that everybody assumes that they know how champagne's made.
Yeah.
I grew up, and out as you being a birder, I grew up with peacocks because they killed rattlesnakes. And living on the eastern side of the valley, where it's more arid, there were quite a few more. So I have peacocks here. I don't think they know what a rattlesnake looks like. They wouldn't have a clue. Not a clue.
Finding shelter.
Not exactly.
They would not have any idea. Hi.
Oh God.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I find really interesting, is how many different styles of wine there are, even when you break it down into red, white, bubbles, and then break it down even further from there. So
It's how often you hear, "I don't like Chardonnay."
all the time, but there's so many different styles of Chardonnay.
So then all of a sudden you put the Chardonnay in front of someone that is not a butter bomb, that's not over oaked, that is got great fruit and great depth to it, then all of a sudden, oh, I like that. So sparkling is very similar to someone will say to me, "Well, what, Joe Blow had some other brand." Well, of course it is. It's just like I drink numerous different Cabernets. Of course you're you'd be sick and tired of drinking the same thing, for all of us, sick and tired of drinking the same thing all the time. I've had the pleasure of working with, when my family's winery closed in '92, I went from working with my father in bubbles to Joseph Phelps, to be VP of marketing for a couple of years, then went on to Mondavi, and then have ran quite a few other wineries, and then started a consulting business about 15 years ago. And I've just been lucky to work with so many great winemakers as well as great brands, and I'm lucky to be able to pull those out and have multiple vintages of things and to be with good friends that are here in the valley. That I think when you drink a bottle of wine, oftentimes people drink that in a different country, and they order the wine here and they go, "It's not the same." Well, it's not the same because it was a whole experience that you had. And for me, I love drinking friends' wines because it makes me happy that it was they produced it and their heart and soul went into it. So I love California. I love Rhone blends, so I love things from both North and Southern Rhone. So I gravitate towards those oftentimes, and then still drink lots of bubbles. So if I can drink, if somebody brings in a good bottle of bubbles, I'm always happy. And happy to learn about different areas. I had lunch in September with a friend of mine, and she brought wines. We had a South African bubbles, we had a Croatian bubbles, we had a Russian bubbles. I mean, it was so much fun to taste some of these wines that I would never have the opportunity to taste from these different countries, and they all have their own nuances.
Definitely. So which type of tasting do you prefer more? Do you prefer a regional side-by-side or a vintage side-by-side?
Oh my goodness. You've got great questions.
Thank you.
I would, well, both, for different matters.
Yeah.
Both, I think trying a vertical of wines is always incredible to see how something has aged over a period of time, or how vintages have been so different as is the terroir and soil. But then also to be able to taste wines that are fairly the same, that as far as the percentage of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, the location, but to see what the winemaker style is, as well as where the grapes are grown. But here, if you put most Napa Valley bubbles together, you're going to see quite a bit of difference, even though so many of us are getting fruit from Carneros. Mm-hmm. And we're getting it from different areas in Carneros, but really it's the style that the winemaker is putting on it, just like a chef. You give 4 chefs the same recipe, it's all going to turn out differently.
This is the Blanc de Noir.
Correct.
So what can you tell me about your process for this specific wine?
Sure. So the brand right now has 2 wines, the Brut, California, and Napa Valley or Carneros Blanc de Noir. This was the first wine for me to release, and it definitely is my baby.
Oh.
It comes from a great vineyard called Mitsuko's, and Mitsuko was married to Jan Schramm from Clos Pegase. She was also a good friend of my mother's, so to go full circle, which is kind of cool. She was given this vineyard by her husband for Valentine's Day, and he gave her a Tiffany's blue box with dirt in it. And the note said, "For the 365 days of the year that I love you." And he gave her 365 acres in Carneros.
Oh my God.
And for me, working for Mondavi all those years and doing events in vineyards surrounding this property, I never knew there was a piece of land that was 365 acres right in the middle of Carneros.
Wow.
So I'm honored to be able to have a few blocks there of both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So this, this gets picked usually the 3rd week of August, and the grapes all go into the winery. Chardonnay goes through 100% malolactic, Pinot's in French oak, and then Robin, my winemaker, and I usually put the blend together around now. Usually it's just after Thanksgiving that we'll start working on it. And then it gets put in the bottle, and it's aged for 3 years on these. Just a little bit shy of 3 years, but 3 years, as long as we can possibly keep it that way. And we're just truly going for some elegance, some nice weight to it, and that's why the Chardonnay goes through malo, because in lieu of being able to age it for as long as we really would love to age it, that really is what happens. We have a Blanc de Blanc on the yeast right now from the same vineyard, which is 100% Chardonnay, and that will not be released until it'll be degorged in 24.
Okay.
And I'm going to be showcasing that at this year's Premier Napa Valley. The first vintage, this is the 19 Blanc de Noir. That 18 I had for Premier Napa Valley a few years ago, and I used old Hans Cornell Blanc de Noir. I think it was 86 Blanc de Noir as the dosage.
Oh.
So it was called something old, something new, and the Blanc de Blanc will, we've decided that this particular 5 cases is from one piece of the block, and I'm naming it after my mother, because Chardonnay in Carneros as well, in Champagne, it's the queen, and we used to call my mother Queenie, so it is in honor of her we're doing that.
So sweet.
Yeah, she was a character, so.
Was your mother involved with the winemaking at your father's winery?
She was the backbone of that winery. So she was definitely the power behind the throne, as you would say. But they worked very, very well together, and she definitely was his sounding board and did all the entertaining. I mean, there's great stories of how, you'd be coming to the winery at 4 or 5 o'clock, and he liked you, and it'd be, oh, Mary Louise, oh, honey, I've got friends I'm bringing home for dinner, in his fabulous German accent. So now, he used to always say, oh, God, no. But it never came out, oh, God, no. It was always, oh, God, no. So to this day, every time I do something that has to do, especially with the brand, I think he is rolling over in his grave going, oh, God, no, honey, what are you doing? So, yeah, it was a great way to grow. It was a great way.
Absolutely.
And what's fun is that both, the wines definitely have been, I don't think I started out that way, but it's basically been an homage to my parents.
It just kind of developed into that.
It really did.
Yeah.
It started actually with Michael Vanderbilt, who designed the label. He asked why I wasn't using these men.
Oh.
And because that was on my family, my father's family in Germany. John Kongsgaard has it on his label. I believe it was Trefethen had it for their second label for years. And the very weekend that Michael Vanderbilt had said, why aren't we using that? I was going through an some old Hans Cornell newsletters, and in there it described what the meaning was. And in the Bible, the men are sent over the mountain to make sure the land is fertile on the other side. Mm-hmm. And as the story comes back, they come back with these huge clusters of grapes and big size fruit. Well, in this newsletter, it said Hans feels that Napa Valley in California is his land of plenty.
Aww.
And with that, I went, it's going on my label. I don't have a choice. This is just, so I'm really glad that, I did that.
Yeah.
It means a lot more. It means a lot with that.
Ties it in a little bit more. That's really sweet. I love how much history is in this valley alone, even though, in France they've been making wine for 2,000 years. And here, we're just getting started with timeline-wise. I mean, we've been making wine realistically since the 1860s, but not to the standard that we make it today. And we're still getting started.
Yeah, there's so much history, and it's we either don't take time to learn it or we take it for granted, and it's great that there's still. I had a group here not long ago that said they were asking a million questions about things, and they said, "Can you please tell us about the saga of the Mondavis?" And I went, well, sure. So I start telling them about Robert Mondavi and Peter Mondavi, and then it's time for their driver to be here. And just as they're getting on the bus, Pete Mondavi drives in. And I said, Pete, I just told these people about the saga of your family. He said, did they spend the night? So just the fact that so many of us, there's so many of us that are still around and still making wine and still loving what we do. And there's many generations here in Napa Valley as well as Sonoma, and just it's great that we are following that European tradition.
Absolutely. So as we start to wrap up towards the end of our session here, what are some things that you would like the viewers to know about where to get your wine?
Well, there's thank you for that. I'm very lucky that here in Napa Valley I have so many great supporters of restaurants that have been Don Giovanni and Gel Mustards that have been supporters from the very beginning, and I so appreciate that. And retail wise, Gary's here in St. Helena, Sunshine Foods, Cellar Collections in Napa. But there's many more. The Brut is probably more available than the Blanc de Noir, and people can also find it on my website too. So, and the website's great because it has a lot of history on it. So I'm old, so there's lots of history.
Good. So visit the website. Well, thank you so much again for hosting me here at your beautiful home. And
My pleasure. Thank you for coming. Cheers.
gosh, I had such a great time visiting with Paula and her puppy dogs. It was a great conversation, and thank you so much for joining me. And I think I'll finish off this glass of Piper Heidsieck. But before I do, if you are interested in expanding your palate the way that I did when I was studying for the W set, check out VineBox in the link in the description. Disclaimer, I do get a kickback if you happen to purchase through my link, but VineBox is a great product where you can try sample-sized vials of wine from all over the world in many different styles without having to commit to purchasing a full bottle. Check it out. Let me know what you think. And of course, like, subscribe, drop in the comments what your favorite champagne house is, and we'll see you next time. Cheers!